Josh Pate with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Late Kick Josh, CML 24/7 Sports. Welcome in, Josh. How are you?
Terrible. I just got an eyelash in my eye about 30 seconds before we went on. I used to think coughing or like sneezing on air was my biggest fear. This, crying while I talk to you two, that is actually my biggest fear. So we'll push through.
I don't know how this works, but like yesterday, for probably the last 5 to 6 hours of the day, I felt like I had something in my left eye. Right? And I did the old, you raise your eyebrow, you look around in the mirror, couldn't find anything. So I just go to sleep. This morning, it's fine. I mean, how does that work? There was clearly something in my eye and it just disappeared overnight.
It's not an old guy problem, though. I mean, 15-year-olds could theoretically deal with this. I just don't ever remember it happening when I was 15.
Yeah, but you're crying and you're dressed in a black T-shirt today. What's up, Josh? Should we call a helpline, or is everything fine? Or these bold predictions on your show, they've got you going down a dark path right now? I love this part of the year where we do these bold predictions, and I love what you do with them. We roll them all into one 4-hour show, but you spread them out. The one that caught my attention, boy, I tell you, there's things you can count on. Allergy season, then it turns into the Masters, then we do these spring games, and then we have people saying that Texas is going to be really good at football. I saw you have to answer the bold prediction. Can Sark's Texas offense be the most prolific in college football this year? Bold prediction. Can that happen?
Okay. The answer is obviously like an asteroid landing in Pelham today. Yes, it can happen. Now, here's our social media department did. And I've been on the phone with them frequently over the past 24 hours. They took that one little quote and they packaged it up and they put it out there. And all of a sudden, I just predicted Texas to have the top scoring offense in the country next year. That's not quite what your boy here said. What I said in response to someone who asked if it was possible, I said, well, they did have statistically a top 10 scoring offense last year. So if I add Quinn Ewers and all this wide receiver and like transfer portal addition by addition, I guess you would call it. If all it pans out, yeah, it's not out of the total realm of possibility they could. What I should have done and what I will do on tonight's show is I'll just put percentages on everything and I'll put like 5 or 10%. That way they cannot possibly bastardize my quotes anymore. And I don't have to deal with, let's just say, assistant coach just from Ohio State calling me insane. Let's say that happened.
Yes. I mean, Josh, they were 18th in the country last year, 35 a game. Ohio State led with 45 a game. It's not that insane to think a better quarterback, more weapons. I don't know what Billingsley or Jai Hall can do at Texas. I don't know how much they'll even get to play. Bijan Robinson's a really good running back. It's not crazy to think an offense could add 10 points a game. I mean, it's not an insane prediction.
We did 10 of them the other night. It wasn't even one of the 7 most insane things that people suggested. Just to give you an idea of how off the rails Tuesday night show went. Yeah, I didn't even think this was going to be controversial. That ended up being the one that popped off the most, though.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you, though, that Quinn Ewers is a better quarterback. You don't know that,
than Hudson
do you?
Card?
You don't know that yet, do you? You don't know if Quinn Ewers can take this offense to anywhere else that it hasn't already been. We don't know what we have in Quinn Ewers. We know what we have in C.J. Stroud.
Right. Well, that's why it's all theoretical, obviously. What I'm thinking is all right, who do I have out there? Steve Sarkisian. What's the one proven commodity in his toolbox? It is developing the quarterback position. At least I've seen him do that. So if I've got a guy whose tools I believe in Quinn Ewers, and I've got a guy who's shown the ability to shape and fashion those tools in Steve Sarkisian, listen, they may still give up 50 points a game for all I know. At least I think I can count on them to score points. So that was the road I went down.
Can you tell me one of the more crazier of the other 7 you mentioned, bold prediction? Give me the one that made your eyelashes fall into your eyeballs.
Well, I thought it was completely outside the realm of believability that Georgia will have an offensive player as a Heisman finalist. Someone came at me with Brock Bowers, and here's where you have to really qualify your responses. We all have seen Brock Bowers play. That's the tight end for Georgia. For the 3 or 4 unfamiliar who that is, he's great. He's a phenomenal player. He had, I think, 800 or so, between 800 and 900 receiving yards last year. Someone came at me and said, if Brock Bowers plays like he did last year, I don't see how he's not in Heisman consideration. Okay. So What you don't do is you don't say, oh, Brock Bowers sucks. There's no way he's going to New York. It's not that. He's a very good player. What you have to do is you have to use history as your guide. The last receiver we've seen win that award is obviously Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, in 2 fewer games than Brock Bowers played last year, had about 1,000 more receiving yards than Brock Bowers did. So I hate to say it, but the level of play Brock Bowers gave you last year, it's nowhere remotely close to being considered for his position, a guy at his position going to New York City. You can still have a great season and play within the scheme that Georgia obviously has found to work and not end up in New York City. Listen, the best player in college football didn't even become a finalist last year. His name's Will Anderson. I hope more people have him on their radar this year, but you can be good and still not make it to New York. You had the usual Saban's going to retire after this year stuff. You had South Carolina winning the East. There were a lot of things thrown at me the other night.
You know, and the other thing, Josh Pate is with us, 24/7 Sports, at Late Kick Josh. If you want to follow him on Twitter, we suggest you do that. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Just to expand on that point, Devontae Smith was also making spectacular wide receiver catches, which is what you have to do to win the Heisman. You have to have spectacular plays. Brock Bowers is a spectacular player, but we can call him whatever we want. He makes tight end catches. I mean, he may line up like a receiver in the slot, whatever, but he's making tight end catches. And it shouldn't be this way, but those are not the things that win you the Heisman.
No, I've always hated the phrase Heisman moment.
Me too.
But I'm not opposed. I get how it has to work, apparently. But you're right about that. And also, like, I would argue, if Kirby Smart decided today, you know what, my sole mission in 2022, I got the title in 21. My sole mission is to have an offense wherein we get a guy to New York City. It would probably happen en route to them losing 2 games. Like, I think Georgia would have to actually lose their way as a program to have the kind of offense on the field that gets one guy statistically to the point where he's a Heisman finalist. I know that sounds like it doesn't make sense to a casual fan. To someone who watches Georgia, it probably makes perfect sense.
Josh Pate is with us. I've just started the series Severance on Apple TV. If I was doing an interview with anyone in the Severance series on my show, it would be Josh. There's nothing behind him. It's very clean. It's generic. I mean, this is very, very futuristic. Talking to our man Josh here.
Let me take a sip out of my very generic coffee.
I mean, my goodness.
On brand.
I
Right
mean,
there, yeah.
there's not a day I don't have 6 logos on. We do 36 in-show commercials. You come on here, and you are like the 38th car in a NASCAR race, just happy to be there trying to find sponsorship for the weekend. It looks good there. I like clean look. He's giving nothing away here. If you want to be in Josh's shot, you got to pay the man some money and get in Josh's shot when he does these hits all over America. The question I wanted to ask, as I, at my age now in mid-50s, try to remember what that is after that long rant right there. I wanted to ask you about the LSU job, the spring game this weekend. What is Brian Kelly's success level? What does he do this year that makes you say that was a successful first season?
We've got this question actually in our mailbag for tonight. Someone asked about Harsin, Heupel, Beamer in their second years, but they asked about Brian Kelly too. So this is show prep for me. I appreciate it, Dunaway. I think there's a chance, since you have to have such a cultural tilling of the soil down there this year, there's a chance that they have to go backwards to go forwards. I know a lot of people are looking at the Jaden Daniels transfer, and everyone just assumes LSU has a top 5 roster. I mistakenly said that last year. I was called on it. They were right. I was wrong. They didn't have a top 5 roster last year. Attrition's hit them pretty hard. I think some of their position groups have been underdeveloped by the previous staff. So anyway, normally a staff goes out the door because they didn't do a good enough job. We don't need to dwell on that. When a new staff comes in, normally it's to counter. It's to 180 approach it from whatever didn't work. And that's exactly what they're doing at LSU. Well, remember when Saban came to Alabama his first year, they lose to Louisiana Monroe. I've spoken to you guys about this before. My single favorite press conference from Saban was the Monday following UL Monroe, because everyone wanted to ask him, when are we going to win? When are you going to win? And he started wagging the finger at him saying, you're worried about winning instead of doing what it takes to win. I could easily see that kind of situation playing out for Brian Kelly this year, where he has to wag the finger at the folks down there because all they want to know is, when are we going to win? The recruiting industry says we have players. When are we going to win? Well, we got to know how to win and win the way that I want to, because you brought me here. You hired me as head coach. It may very well be that through the common prism, you look at LSU this year and it looks like they're taking steps back. It could be that they're taking cultural steps forward. It's just that, they gotta prune a little bit. Sometimes you gotta prune.
Josh, perhaps it was always Lincoln Riley's plan to write an apology letter in the Players Tribune months after he took the job, or it was because his former quarterback described it as a toxic situation. Which one is true, or is there some truth in the middle? Obviously, Spencer Rattler and Lincoln Riley are not going to send each other Christmas cards, I don't think. But, boy, that seemed like some weird timing to write the apology letter.
Is this not the greatest thing? So Spencer Rattler, about every week and a half, has had a new headline, whether it's I've learned more here in 1 week than I did my entire time at Oklahoma. It's just nice to be in a toxic-free environment. It's one of the more high-profile breakups since J-Lo and Ben the first time. They got back together. Lincoln and Spencer Rattler getting back together. To answer your question, I don't think that on Lincoln Riley's to-do list when he landed in L.A. was pen apology letter to Players Tribune right before the spring game. I don't think that was on his to-do list. Now, having said that, it probably became necessary because he's got a guy over on the other coast at the other USC trashing him relentlessly. And so he's got to fight back. We've all seen Mean Girls. We understand what happens when you don't fight back. And if we don't understand that, I would advise you call in sick the rest of the day and go rent Mean Girls.
Not a bad way to spend a overcast day here in the South. All right, so we're winding down on spring football, and we'll get into those countdown to media days, which will be happening pretty soon. Do you, as a fan of college athletics, do you get caught up in the NFL draft 1 week from tonight to see the guys who are leaving the sport we love so much to go to the next level? Do you enjoy the draft at all?
I do enjoy the draft. I'm kind of looking off in the distance here instead of making eye contact with you, because that's how I feel. It's a very melancholy night for me because I do not view the NFL as the top rung of the ladder in my particular fandom. College football is the top rung of the ladder. That's where I send those guys off. I'm like a father watching the son head off to college, and unbeknownst to me, he's actually going to the pros, not college. But I don't get caught up in it. My world does not revolve around it. I have not spent any time on our show talking about it. Management came to me yesterday and made the mistake of asking me if I want to host a draft special next Friday night instead of telling me I'm going to, and I shot it down. And so now they're attempting to now tell me that I have to. So that's been a really fun 48 hours here. I can't tell you what the top 10 order is. I know the players, obviously. I know their backstories, probably knew them when they were in 10th grade. But no, like, you guys are into this probably far more than me, correct? Like, you guys have spent a fair amount of time talking about this.
Well, Lance does. Brown, we mention it, yes.
I mean, for one thing, in this state, it fills a little less because Alabama's not going to fill it up.
That's right.
As they have. So I think it's going to lack a little bit. I mean, if you look at TV ratings, traditionally Birmingham has done very well in the TV ratings for the NFL draft. A lot of that is because it's been, Alabama player. You're not going to see that as much this year. So I do think there'll be less interest locally here for it.
It's sort of a slap in the face. It's a reminder that Alabama lost the national championship game because it's going to be a Georgia player, somebody else, a Georgia player, somebody else, a Georgia player, somebody else,
worse,
an Alabama player, a Georgia player. And it'll be like, oh, man, that's right. They lost the game. We've talked about it, but not as much.
I got my hand up here. So Nashville's hosted the draft. They brought it to Cleveland, I think. It's in Vegas this year. But yeah, you're right. Birmingham is always a dependable top-tier market for the NFL. If, in an alternate universe, they ever have the draft in Birmingham, where exactly are they holding that thing at?
Probably the new development downtown Uptown and Protective Stadium, Uptown and Protective Stadium. In that area somewhere, I think they would do it.
It looks horrible on television in the other games. We just put 17,100 people in to watch a startup league last was it Saturday
Yeah,
night?
Saturday night before
last
Easter.
Saturday night.
Yeah, with rain.
Then they came on Sunday and played 3 games with teams named Houston and other cities, and everyone was bashing Birmingham because there was nobody in the stands. I mean, when you call one team Birmingham and you call the other 7 teams by another name, I don't know how many people you think would go watch those games. I don't know what they're going to do with those other games. But if we can put 17,100 people to watch the first USFL game, not even knowing what it's going to look like, I think we probably could pack a stadium in a city street, not like Nashville, which I think will always be the GOAT, the one you try to emulate.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. But you know this, Josh. Nashville's a good one-off event. Birmingham is a good one-off event town. We are really good about these random events coming in and turning out for it, where, if you had to do it every 10 years or once a year every 10 years, you probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up a pro wrestling fan, and that terminology, that one-off event town, I used to hear that all the time. There's some markets like New York City. It's dependable. You can be in there every 6 months. The makeup is different in a market like Birmingham. Memphis is that kind of market too. But you can one-off it, and you could make that place look like Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve if you want to.
You're a big wrestling fan growing up. Dunaway was quoting Ric Flair earlier in the show.
I have to apologize to him, actually, because I was one of the guilty parties lighting up the I Ryan over there. And I did not fully know if Dunaway was aware of the innuendo and metaphor that he was weaving throughout his commentary there. But typical master fashion there. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Everybody likes to ride Space Mountain, man.
Okay, so
the dirtiest host in the game, right there. Center stage.
All right, here's Josh Pate. Watch him tonight. Plenty of college football coming up at 24/7 Sports. Late Kick Josh on Twitter is where you go to follow him. Thank you, Josh. Have a great weekend.
I'll see you guys. Appreciate it.
That's 20 years of terrestrial radio of still saying things and people knowing what you're saying is what that is.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, Josh was with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.